Ever since I was a kid, I've been drawn back to Old Forge like it has some kind of magnetic pull. This tiny hamlet tucked into Herkimer County, inside Webb, New York State's largest town by land area, it's more than just a dot on the map. Picture this: pristine Fulton Chain Lakes, threading through endless Adirondack forests, where every bend in the water promises something new. Old Forge isn't just a place you visit. It's a gateway, a starting point. And in this video, I'm going to tell you its full story, because trust me, it's one worth hearing. The ancient foundations. Let's rewind. Way back. Beneath Old Forge lies a geological uplift that took millions of years to form. Heat, pressure, and the slow grind of tectonic forces sculpted these mountains and valleys grain by grain. Then came the ice. The Laurentide ice sheet, imagine a frozen blanket thousands of feet thick, crawled across this region, carving deep basins and smoothing the landscape over millennia. When it finally melted, the first people arrived. Small bands of Paleo-Indians moving through an unfamiliar world, hunting and foraging to survive. Fast forward through generations, and the Haudenosaunee established thriving longhouse communities here. They mastered these waterways, gliding through the lakes in birch-bark canoes. Today, the Northern Forest Canoe Trail still follows some of those ancient routes, a 7 to 40-mile living connection to the past. Contact and conflict. Then the 1600s hit and everything changed. Europeans arrived hungry for beaver pelts, and the fur trade sparked competition that exploded into warfare across the entire region. The balance of power in the Northeast shifted violently. But here's the thing. By the 1780s, when the dust started to settle, the Adirondacks, still wild, still unsettled, still waiting. The Brown Tract Era. In 1791, Herkimer County was officially created, bringing government structure to what was basically still frontier wilderness. The very next year, a wealthy New York merchant named Alexander Macomb made a massive gamble. He bought over 2 million acres in northern New York. They called it Macomb's Purchase. Enter John Brown, a Rhode Island entrepreneur with big dreams. He snapped up over 200,000 acres of Macomb's land, including what would become Old Forge. Brown had a vision: homes, farms, thriving industry. He built a wagon road from Remsen to open up access. He constructed a dam and mills on the Moose River's middle branch, harnessing water power and expanding the Fulton Chain Lakes for easier travel. But the Adirondacks don't yield easily. Life on Brown's tract was brutal. By 1803, every settler had abandoned the area, and that same year, John Brown died, his grand vision incomplete. A few years later, his daughter Sarah and son-in-law Charles Frederick Herreshoff tried to salvage the dream. They brought sheep, built an impressive manor, opened the area's first iron forge. It all failed. The harsh Adirondack conditions crushed their ventures, and in 1819, Charles took his own life. The abandoned forge he left behind? That became the landmark people used for directions, and eventually it gave this place its name. Old Forge. Born from failure, waiting for a second chance. Revival and the guides. 20 years of silence passed. Then in the 1840s, Otis Arnold showed up with his wife Amy and their 12 kids, yes, 12, and breathed life back into that abandoned manor. They couldn't do it alone. They relied on local woodsmen who were part of something new, a generation of Adirondack guides. These were the people who knew every trail, every campsite, every fishing hole. No GPS, no maps on their phones, just knowledge passed down and hard-won experience. The wilderness was their office, and they carried adventurers through places most people couldn't even imagine. Infrastructure and transformation. At this point, the region was still wonderfully, stubbornly wild. Robert Fulton had surveyed these waterways back in 1811, dreaming of a canal, but nothing came of it. However, the state had other plans. They needed water for the massive Erie Canal to the south, So they raised Brown's original dam, creating a reservoir and reshaping the Fulton Chain Lakes even further. Suddenly, you had steady water levels perfect for floating logs. The lumber industry exploded, with timber riding the Moose River to distant markets. And here's a fun detail. Around this time, Emmett Marsh, the godfather of Adirondack fishermen, brought the very first trout eggs to the area. He literally seeded these waters with the fish we catch today. The railroad changes everything. Then 1892 arrived, and Dr. William Seward Webb completed something game-changing: the Mohawk and Malone Railroad. Suddenly, Old Forge wasn't isolated anymore. You could reach it from the Mohawk Valley and the St. Lawrence River. The wilderness became accessible. City dwellers starved for fresh air flooded in. Wealthy families built elaborate great camps along the lakes. Think massive log mansions disguised as rustic retreats. Old Forge was officially on the map: conservation and community. As tourism grew, so did awareness. By the late 1800s, Franklin B. Houff, the father of American forestry, and other conservationists helped establish the AdirondackPark, protecting these forests and lakes under a forever wild clause that still holds today. The Brown Tract Guide Association formed to represent the guides, while organizations like the Adirondack League Club set aside massive tracts for wilderness protection. Old Forge was becoming a real community. Abenaki families, including Chief Jules Dennis and his relatives, spent summers along the lakes. Pioneers like George and Jenny Goodsell built businesses that supported life in the backcountry. And get this: Old Forge's mailboat service started in 1901 and has run continuously ever since. Letters floated across the lakes while a pickle boat delivered groceries to isolated camps. Buggies rattled regularly between Old Forge, Eagle Bay, Big Moose, and Thendara. Moses Asher Cohen opened Old Forge Hardware in the basement of the Forge House Hotel, and it instantly became essential. In 1903, Old Forge officially became a village, though they later dissolved it because the administrative costs were too high. Kids would gather excitedly whenever Ernie Flanders came through delivering ice. They called him the Pied Piper, and honestly, that's just adorable. The modern era, the 1920s, brought automobiles, first delivered by train, then rolling in on the newly built Route 28. The Great Depression and World War II slowed things down, but post-war recovery brought a boom. A local airport opened. Tourism roared back. By the 1950s, Old Forge Hardware had expanded significantly. The enchanted forest of the Adirondacks opened its doors. Macaulay Mountain Ski Area started welcoming winter sports enthusiasts. The community invested heavily in trails and winter recreation, and Old Forge earned its reputation as the Snowmobile Capital of the East. But they didn't stop there. Around the 1980s, Old Forge became the starting point for the 90-mile Adirondack Canoe Classic. The enchanted forest expanded into water safari. The town of Webb Historical Association organized to preserve the area's stories, today and tomorrow, and that brings us to now. In the 21st century, Old Forge stands as the starting point of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, the country's longest water trail, spanning 740 miles through 3 states. The town thrives on year-round outdoor activities. People still come to experience what drew visitors here over a century ago: pristine lakes, endless trails, mountains that challenge you. Every season transforms this place. Spring brings rushing water and new growth. Summer explodes with activity. Fall paints the forests in impossible colors. And winter turns Old Forge into a snow-covered playground. This is why I keep coming back. Why I've been drawn here my whole life. Old Forge isn't just a place with a great story. It's a place that's still writing it and inviting you to be part of it. Thanks for watching.